Okay. Understood. Yeah. So as long as we can remember all the things that she would do for us, I guess. Like, do we have a way to track everyone too, Kemba?
Yep, it's manual.
Okay.
Okay. So let's get started. Can you see my
Yeah.
screen?
I can see it.
Okay,
I can see too.
awesome. Okay. So welcome, guys, to Proven Systems for Successful Landlords. Andrea, why don't you start us out?
Yes, thank you all for joining us tonight. We find in general, over time, everyone that wants to get into real estate ownership for the purpose of renting always want to know, how can I tenant and get the best tenants myself? And so this is why we designed this session. And of course, being landlords ourselves, it's great that we can also share our experience and things that we've learned over time that's made it successful, so that we have less and less, times that we're, having tenants that don't pay. So here we go, right, Kemba? Let's start with just some of what we've done and had success doing. So what we currently do is we don't just tenant, we also have our own properties that we manage. We have other owners that come to us, and we also manage some of their units. So we've got 34 units under management. And I think the 181 new tenants placed is probably a little bit on the conservative side, because I believe if you look at all our short-term rentals, we've tenanted quite a few times over and had a lot of success, because we get a lot of great reviews. Of course, we get some of the bad. It's not all positive and great, but in general, we do have a really good track record with tenants being happy with the units that we provided. We know that some of the key things that you need to look for when you're screening tenants, similar to a job interview, you're really taking a note of their previous employment and making sure that or their current employment and previous employment, to make sure that they have a stable source of income. Because when you have a stable source of income, it's likely that they're going to be able to continually pay the rent and take care of, all the associated costs if they have utilities and so forth. We make sure that we check for credit. I would say that credit is absolutely important in that process. I don't think it's the be all and end all. I definitely feel that, we have to look at where people are coming from, if they're new immigrants or if they're fairly new, just getting started, their credit, and or they're, starting over if they've come through some challenging times. And so we can then look to a guarantor or someone who obviously would value this person and say, hey, you know what, I'll step up and participate in saying they're honorable and they'll be able to pay, and they'll back them up. And so we often find that helps, especially with students or newcomers or anyone that sort of, had a challenge with credit. We make sure that we use the standard Ontario lease if we're here in Ontario, and each province have their own, but absolutely you want to make sure you're using the most current and the standard one to protect you in the event, and the tenant in the event that you have to pursue anything with the landlord and tenant board. And then in that lease, we don't just take what's standard, we also make sure that we make sure that it's set to meet your needs as an owner, because oftentimes you may have unique features or things that you want to keep addressed or have taken care of in the lease agreement, so that it's maybe an addendum. We do move-in inspections, which is very, very important. I think that the move-in inspection, Kemba, you would agree that, without sort of verifying at the time of transferring the unit over to the tenant, that it's very hard later to say that they're responsible for some of the damages or some of the, issues that may arise after, right? We don't want to pin it on a tenant unless we can for sure say, hey, when we look back at that inspection report, you sign off saying, this was good, that was good, and right, and anything that was outstanding, the owner or ourselves had to make sure was addressed. So move-in inspection is a very good and necessary tool. And that could include photographs of the unit or a video of the unit so that you have more than just a written statement, but also, pictures don't lie, or videos, right?
Mhm.
The guidelines for tenants to use, we know that as owners in general, I think it's fair to say most owners would do a better job taking care of their property than someone that they rent it to. And so to help tenants, because it's not just that they're negligent, sometimes they just don't know. And so to help them, we provide them with guides and tools to help them do a really good job in caring for the property over time. And that may be simple things like empty the lint, the dryer lint in the dryer, making sure you vacuum the fans in the bathroom once in a while to sort of allow each of those appliances or those features in the house to run and function well. So it's really good to share those guidelines. Plus, people are coming from all parts of the world, and some of what we know is really important here to care for the property they don't know and they're not familiar with. So tenant selection is absolutely important when you look at all of these things and you take into consideration these facts that we've pointed out. And as I said, we've got a really good track record. We've got 25 plus, I would say 30 plus years together combined, Kemba, in the industry. Our Google review shows
We're
that.
old.
Sorry, we're not old, we're young. We're young. Today, probably more like 100 before we're old.
Yeah.
We got a 5-star review on Google, which means, not do we just love what we do, but our clients love what we do, and we really value that. And as I said, we've identified outside of our long-term rentals, we definitely have a lot of short-term rentals that we're constantly filling weekly, monthly. And so that keeps us, getting more and more experience, because really each week we're learning something new and different. We're not experienced in the sense that we never see something different. We're always learning and seeing new things. And our goal when we're, sort of working with you or working towards acquiring a property is always to find a way to ensure that property is giving us double-digit returns. So our aim is 25% or greater in terms of return on investment.
Mhm.
So I know that we're talking about tenanting and tenant placement tonight, but it's really important that you're buying good properties, because when you do, then absolutely putting the best tenants in place makes sense. And as I said, if I remember last year when we met Vincent was stressed and worried, wanted to make sure that he could get his place rented quickly and not be, months without income, because that's what we all worry about, right? Is vacancy. You don't want to have to fill, and pay the mortgage and the taxes. The goal of buying investments is to ensure that the rent that you generate from that property will be covered by your tenant, that perfect tenant that you find for your unit. And then that takes care of all the expenses associated with that property. And so Vincent, it was really, I think Kemba quickly after, he had been months empty, we were able to get him in less than a month or so. We found him a great tenant that moved in, is still living there over a year later, and he's thrilled. And of course, he bought that property with generational wealth in mind. He bought it for his daughter, and he is just thrilled that it's going to continue doing what he plans, which is building wealth for her. Okay,
Mhm.
so outside of, we're proud of our 5-star Google review, but we're also pleased that, we've been featured in some different reputable sources that has helped, highlight some of the things that we've been doing, and or we've met some great people along the way when we've done some podcasts, either through our own podcasts and or joining other businesses that we've met along the way that have fantastic podcasts. And it really is just learning how to help each other be successful. And when you look at this quote, 90% of millionaires become so through owning real estate. I truly believe that, because I know prior to starting out, with my first purchase, I only imagined that I could build wealth and become wealthy through real estate. And today I can say that I've successfully been able to accomplish that. I wouldn't have done it otherwise. I don't have an inheritance that's going to come in that will provide that $1 million, status at all. So you can do that through real estate. If I can do it, you can do it. And I know that together, Kemba and I have come together as a family to ensure that we can build generational wealth, not just for ourselves today and our kids, but for our kids' kids, right? So it's really important to, if that's something that you're considering, I know that some of you are owners tonight and some of you are also working on becoming an owner, right? You may have already made your purchase and it's a future pre-construction property, or it may be something that you're still working on. So this is why we continuously have these types of events to ensure that we can educate you.
So what are we here to talk about tonight?
How to find amazing tenants and to get not just amazing tenants, but also make sure you're getting the best rent. And so Kemba will cover some of these tips for you.
So when we think of this slide is just, really about illustrating to you when you're renting property, it's really, really important that you price your units right and you work on finding the right tenant quickly, because it's very hard to come back from missing 1 month's vacancy, far less 2 or 3. So when you think of if you're renting a unit, and especially in the last year and a half, we've had a lot of ups, mainly downs in the rental pricing. And many owners we met out there were very reluctant to change their pricing. But really, if you go without rent for a month, it takes about 4 years to make up what you've lost on average. If your rent is $1,500, if your rent is higher, it takes even more. But if you decrease your rent by $50 just to match up to where the market is, you may take about 1.5 years to gain that back just in the rental increases. And we're talking about Ontario, right? So you're only allowed to increase your rent by, in some cases, less than 2%. And so that's what we're talking about. When you're bumping up your rents just by the allowable amounts, you'll take that long to make up that money. So it's really important to look at what the market is saying, to price your unit right so that you can get it rented really quickly and avoid vacancies, because vacancies take up a lot of that income that you would be earning. So we just talk a little bit about that. And so in terms of securing a good tenant, as Andrea mentioned, we do a property pre-inspection. So this is even before you're about to put your property on the market. You want to take a walk around, make sure everything's safe, make sure it's clean. Some people, you have a move out, you have a move in, and you may want to do just a surface level cleaning. Sometimes that's not sufficient. You would want to do some detail cleaning. There's services out there that will do a move in, move out cleaning for you, or if you're handy and you know your way around a mop, you can do the cleaning yourself. But sometimes we don't become landlords to do everything. So it's worth it if you're not able to just make sure that your unit is well cleaned before you put it back on the market. As much as you can to make the place modern or updated. A fresh coat of paint is never something that's harmful. It may take some time, but it's worth it in some cases, depending on how the last tenant left your unit. So just making sure that any updates you can do, taking a walk around, making sure no knobs are loose and things are just in order once one tenant leaves is good. Making sure that you can offer either, whatever you have standard in your unit, you know what's the market is looking for, or upgraded features. So we have a client right now who has a beautiful fireplace in their unit. Actually, 2 clients who have fireplaces in their unit. Those are nice features to have. You may not want to put those in, but when you're thinking about buying into rental property, you want to consider what features that it has to attract any prospective tenants. And also, when you're doing your pre-inspection, you look to see that the property is in good condition. And so when we say there's a difference between cleanliness and condition, so you want to make sure everything is working. There's nothing like, so your stove, the burners are all working, the microwave works if there's a microwave included. You may not want to run the washer dryer, but it's worth it to understand that everything is working. So you make sure you do a walk around. There's no broken items throughout the unit, because it's funny, it's when you're starting to show the unit that these things just, you know, somebody touches something, they test something, they open a drawer, and things just fall apart. It really detracts from say a prospective tenant looking at your property. So you want to make sure that everything is in working condition. And as a landlord, that's up to you to take that walk around. You can definitely do it after it's found, but it definitely doesn't help you when you're trying to rent the unit. Now, strategic photos and videos. So we recommend at all times when your unit is empty to take your best photos. If you have a professional camera, or you know someone with a professional camera and they're handy with it, some people may have one, they don't know how to use it. But if you know someone who has one and can take some great shots for you, that's the time. Otherwise, it's worth it to get an initial set of photos for your unit and keep those for the life of your tenants or your ownership. Because tenants will move in and move out, but it'll be really a lot easier for you if you keep a record of the photos that you have from when the unit was brand new and empty. The only times you really need to update those photos is if you've done a major renovation, or if you've painted and it's a considerably different color. Sometimes what you can do is you can keep the color standard and just refresh it so that you don't have to change much in terms of your photos and your videos. And in this day and age, you know, we just came through the pandemic. We're still in the tail end. Everything is online, everything is video. So it's a great idea to have a good video of your unit to make sure that you can do virtual tours if you need to. Spend the time, spend the money to get a virtual tour done, so that even if you just have one from your cell phone, it's better than nothing, so that you have a walkthrough. It can help when you have a tenanted unit to have those videos, and making sure that you can show the unit without actually needing to go in right away, and give people an idea of what they're going to see when they go in. For the most part, I would say 80 to 90% of tenants want to physically see a unit before they commit to renting it. We've had a few over time, Andrea, who've been like, no, I want to take it, I don't need to see it. Sometimes that's a red flag, but for the most part, people want to see it, but the video will give them an idea and they'll come in to see it. Now, in terms of market rent analysis, we'll talk a little bit about some of the sites we look at and how we go about doing that, but it's important, as I said, to avoid vacancies because you're not priced right. Do a market rent analysis, look at what units in your neighborhood are charging, what are the features they're including. You never want to compare your unit to, say you have a 1-bedroom and you're comparing it to the 2 bedrooms on the market and you price it like a 2-bedroom. Your unit will not rent very fast. So you want to make sure that you're doing a proper comparison with all the same features, and your unit is priced according to the market. In some markets, you can price high and you will still rent because it's so tight. And that's what we were facing before the pandemic. Now that the pandemic is had its way with us, we have to be a lot more strategic with pricing. Over the last 18 months, we've offered various types of incentives to help encourage rentals, whether it be 3 months, decreased rent amount, or we haven't gone, I think in one case, Andrea, we did 1 month free. We haven't done a lot of.
Yeah, and that was at the owner's discretion. We didn't recommend it. He didn't need to do it. We would have still rented his unit, but he chose that, Kemba.
Mm-hmm. But these are all incentives that you could look at and see what the market is like and offer that to help get your unit rented quicker. but it's in conjunction with looking at your market
Yeah,
rent.
offering internet for a period of time at, the owner's cost, anything. Because really, I think, especially in the condo market in Toronto, it's fairly competitive. I've been to buildings and there are like, 100 lock boxes on the metal fence, or on the rails in the stairwells. So there's a lot of competition. So better you stand out from the competition with some incentives that tenants like and owners can afford to offer.
Mm-hmm. Now, in many cases, people say that people don't read anymore, but
I don't.
we always think it's important to, and there is some legal ramifications too of doing a proper listing description, because what'll happen is what's in your listing description is what goes into your lease. In terms of features and offerings in your lease. So when you describe your unit, for the most part, what you're offering with that description is what ends up going into your lease. So you want to have maybe highlight all the features and finishes that may not specifically go into your lease, but definitely the features may go in. Any amenities that are around to help encourage and show prospective tenants what is offered with your unit. Definitely schools, groceries, shopping. If you're in a more rural area, maybe some of the natural features, say parks and trails, and anything that encourages the type of tenant that you want. So for example, if you're in a family-oriented area and you have a 4-bedroom house, you want to show what offers will attract, what's in your area that will attract your ideal type of tenant. If you say you're downtown, and you're looking for students, you want to say the library's close by, or whatever features that your ideal type of tenant may be looking for. You look to see what your unit has and can offer, and you make sure you put that in your listing description.
Yeah, you're really trying to showcase your unit in the best light, and you're selling it to prospective tenants.
Absolutely. And make sure to also note what features of your unit are private versus shared. That can waste a lot of time where, people are coming to see units and then they're like, the laundry is shared. Oh, that's not for me. And so once they find that out, if it's not in your listing description, it's a waste of time because it's not a feature that they want to accept. And so you want to just make sure that you're clear about what's shared versus what's private. And also, when you're describing your unit, don't put in features like only women, only men, no any type of, specific type of person, because you really, it's discrimination if you do that. So we just advise to just make sure you're just highlighting what your unit has to offer versus saying any type of person or situation that you don't want. You just want to leave that out of your description. Property showings. So we always recommend that you do your property showings. I tend to be more open in terms of the timing, but I think it's the best way to do it is to schedule your showings for a specific time, have several of your showings at the same time so that you are showing that there's a bit of competition for your unit. You don't want any showings to overlap. You want to give people time to see it, but at the same time, you just want to make sure that your showings are scheduled. It saves you time and it's more efficient to do it that way. Also, when you're looking at your assessment process, your assessments start from the time a tenant reaches out, whether they're reaching out through a phone call or an email to say, I'm interested in your unit. Some tenants share quite a bit of information at that point. You want to just take notes on what that person is sharing. During the showing, you want to definitely also take note of what that person is sharing, because one of the things in verifying a good tenant is making sure that you're matching up what a tenant is saying to you along the way to make sure that their facts are all lining up and they are who they say they are, and the picture of who they are is clear. So you're looking for initial contact at the showing, whatever they put into their rental application. And then also when you speak to their references, so you'll be speaking to, and we can get into who they'll be referring to, who you'll be calling to do the references, but you definitely want to take note of all those bits of information to match it up when you're doing your assessment.
Yeah, you're looking to see consistency in everything, that in all your interactions with them, and then in the references and employment and all of that. You want to see consistency. And I think, Kemba, did you mention that you often use social media as well as
Yeah,
another
we do get to
file?
that for sure.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
So in terms of the tenant screening, you want to make sure that you're confirming employment. Employment is one thing. So somebody may have a job letter, but you want to see pay stubs as well, because and any additional income that a person may have. So someone's income may not all be from a job. They may have investment income. They may have baby bonuses. They may have child support. So you want to just make sure that you're getting a full picture of all the income they have. Consider how consistent that income will be. Is it just a summer job? Is it a full-time job? What is the consistency of that? So if you're renting that to them for 6 months and they have a job that'll last a year, that sounds like it makes sense. But if you're renting to them and you expect them to be there for a long term, you want to make sure that the income that you're reviewing matches up, and that it will be consistent throughout their tenancy. Getting a full credit report is important. Just getting a credit score doesn't tell you all about an individual and what their situation is. So it's important to get a full credit report. You get ID, so matching up to all the bits of information you have, making sure that that ID matches. Personal references sometimes can be a bit of a warm and fuzzy, because if you're getting a personal reference, the likelihood is it's a friend, it's a family member, they're going to speak highly of that person, but it still gives you a sense of who they are. You can find out different bits of information about, where they're coming from, who they are, and it also helps you to determine, based on what you've heard in the showings, in the initial contact, if their reference sort of lines up to what they've said and who they are. That's also helpful. Bank statements and bank account numbers are important, not so much during your tenancy, but if ever you have an issue with a tenant, having that information on file. And we haven't said it here, but definitely all the information you collect, you want to start creating a file for your tenant so that you make sure that you've collected all that. But it's important, if there's ever an issue and there's money to be collected from your tenant at a later date, having bank accounts or the statements to show the bank accounts are important. And also when you're screening, you want to check the tenancy history. One good tip, Andrea, you shared this, back when long time ago, but when you're calling previous landlords, it's more important that you speak to maybe one landlord ago, not their current landlord, because a current landlord who wants to get rid of a tenant may be willing to say anything to make you happy, including they're great, they pay on time. So although that's good information to have from a current landlord, it's also great. It's sometimes better to speak to a previous landlord. Not always possible, because a tenant may have a previous landlord who's 5 years ago or something very long time ago. That landlord may not even remember. You may not be able to reach them, but it's something that you can try to do, is reach their previous landlord to find out if there's any information that will be helpful to you understanding their history of payment and care of the unit. We have a question. Has there been any situation regarding someone trying to sublease? So subletting is allowed in Ontario, and it is actually something in your standard lease where you are not actually allowed to deny a tenant the ability to sublet the unit. It's something that is controversial in terms of landlords thinking, well, it's my unit, I don't want to allow you. But if you have no specific grounds that say the landlord tenant board may feel is sufficient, they would be asked, you're supposed to allow them to sublet if you have no specific issues. But it is still the landlord's decision to say yes or no, but it's something that's they are allowed to do. That's all I can say.
And I don't think there's anything wrong with that, Kemba. We would encourage you to then step up and do the work that you would have done for the original tenant in terms of verifying all the information and ensuring that I mean, if you make it seem as if it's, unacceptable and it's not okay, something can happen behind your back and you don't know. So it's just better that you step up and do it and do the work. I think we recently helped an owner that we worked with on a similar scenario. And so where someone wanted to just sublet, right? So I think that you can either let the tenancy end and move on and get your own new tenants, or you can offer the opportunity for them to fill it with a recommended tenant.
Yeah.
Verify.
And then the other question is around any thoughts about applicants using guarantors when screening? So guarantors are, if someone is not listed on the lease as a tenant, it's harder for you to go after the guarantor for any missed payments, or we don't say it's not done. We absolutely do allow for guarantors. There's some people who need one, they're young, they don't have much credit. Say parents or adults in their life are helping them get the unit. You can't, it's not advisable to say absolutely not to guarantors. There are situations you should be getting the same information from a guarantor that you'd be getting from the applicant themselves. So credit and income information. You might even want to find out from the guarantor what their housing costs are, because in the event that the tenant that they're guaranteeing can't pay, can the guarantor actually afford to help or to afford to put any monies in? If the guarantor is no better than or has no ability to pay for their living expenses and this other additional unit, they're not a very strong guarantor. So you just have to be willing to ask for and get all the information from the guarantor as well, and potentially put them on.
The question is, can it hold up? I think from the tenancy board, Kemba, they don't use, the guarantor is not viable. It's more for you and the tenant, especially for the newest incoming immigrant to the country who doesn't just, have everything in place to easily be approved. It provides security to you, and even maybe, just it shows that that person is credible in the eyes of their family and friends or whomever stepped up to do that. But you can't go to the tenancy board and use that guarantor to collect payment.
Someone asked, can they sublease for a higher rent? I believe there is a rule where they're not allowed to sublet at a higher rent, but that's something that's hard to really say that they won't do that and get a better rent than what you're offering, depending on who they're renting to and their agreement is between them. You're supposed to know what's happening. They're supposed to inform you. You're supposed to approve it. But it's really hard to tell if they're getting any more rent than what, especially if they may be subletting to multiple people. Like, say, I have two friends who are moving in, they're subletting, and so it's hard to really say. What protections do you have? Okay, so in terms of protections, that's a very hard word to use, but a tenant is required to pay as soon as the rent is due. They are required to pay. You as the landlord are responsible to notify them that they are late, and they're required to pay. In the last year, as I don't know if any of you have known, but we can share this, the landlord tenant boards in Ontario have been very behind. So although the tenants are required to pay, you as the landlord are required to go to the board with any enforcement of that payment. And because the boards were very far behind, you could not get your hearing done within a timely manner. And so that was a very challenging situation. But in general, the boards do have a certain time frame to respond to any request for payment. And the boards are fairly consistent when it comes to payment. If rent is due, they are enforcing the collection of rent. They will deduct any sort of repairs that are proven by the tenant or anything that is left undone in the unit that the tenant can prove. It's not just hearsay. They have to have proof that these things are not being done, and they will deduct that from whatever rent is owing in some cases. But
I think the protection that you have, Kemba, for not non-payment of rent is that you have to enforce it. First, you have to issue the N4, and you have to follow the guidelines. So you cannot just say to the tenant it's owed and it's late. You have to actually put it in writing and use the forms that are required by the board. And they're all available online. If you're not even sure what they're called or what they are, you just search it. My tenant didn't pay, and it will come up. So use the board approved forms to issue, and don't wait a week or two or a month or 3 later. Do it after you've notified them that they're late. It's due the 1st, the 2nd comes, they don't have it, or at the end of the 1st, you let them know you haven't received it, because it starts the clock ticking. They still get time after you issue that N4 to pay, and they can wait right up until the due date. It's their choice, but either way, they're expected to pay. And if they don't pay by that date, then you're going to file your complaint to the board and start pursuing action to receive payment, right? And then there's a series of other forms, but you are all, like Kemba said, and the board expects, if you rent, you're to pay the rent. If you're in my property and you owe me $2,000 every month, you're to pay the $2,000, and there's no ifs and or buts about that. It's just, yes, there was a backlog in the last year.
Yeah. And so that just says you're responsible to make sure you're giving notices in a timely way. So if it's due on the 1st, you give a notice on the 2nd, and then that starts the clock and so on. So yeah.
And
so
just follow, the forms are very, very clear. You can't make any errors on it. You follow the exact date and timelines that you're allowed to, and the amounts that you're allowed to claim. Like, you cannot claim for NSF, you cannot claim for late fees, all the other things that you want to put in your lease or add to it, those are not acceptable, and you can't make the claim. The claim is just for the rent that's owed, and any amounts that are required as a part of the rent, such as utilities, that are written into the lease, right? And so just be very clear, because as soon as you mess up that paperwork, it will be pushed aside and won't be addressed.
Yeah. Okay. Just so that we try to keep people on time, just as one of the last things is make sure that you have a standard list of questions that you're asking during your interview process and your reference checks. This helps in comparing different tenants as you get multiple applications. It helps to keep your mind clear and consistent on what answers you're getting, because sometimes if you ask multiple people different questions, when you come back to try to compare, say, a situation or a tenant, it's sometimes it gets muddled, or it's not really a fair comparison, because you may have more information on one person, less on another. So it's helpful to keep your questioning consistent as much as possible, and you also get to make sure you're getting all your information in if you're going off a list of questions, instead of having a general conversation when you call to do reference checks. Okay.
Absolutely.
Reach the perfect tenant and reduce vacancy. So one of the things is just, now in this age of technology, there's so many places you could advertise. Like, it's just, Facebook, Kijiji, Craigslist. We could just go on. Some of them are not as easy. So for example, you'd have to work with a realtor to be able to put your listing on realtor.ca. But all the others, there's either a cost or it's free to put it on. Usually to get more visibility, there is a cost. In terms of traffic, and the source for this was Single Key, but Craigslist has a lot of traffic. Kijiji has, great traffic. Facebook obviously has a lot of traffic as well. Different areas use different types of different areas are more popular. So for example, there's an application called Rent Faster. Rent Faster is quite popular out west in, say, the Alberta region. We find Rent Faster is not that popular out here in Ontario. Because we have rental property in both places, we kind of know that some applications don't work as well in certain places. And Andrea, I mean, you've used viewit.ca in some places, and sometimes it's like, wow, I have so many applicants from Viewit. And then other times it's like, not getting anyone. So you really have to match up your application that you're using with the area that you're working in and the rental market that you're in to make sure that you're getting the best, you're attracting the most tenants for your unit.
Kemba, any questions that you might ask? It's just a question that came up with respect to identifying red flags within a tenant, like a potential tenant.
Yeah. So
I think you can play the video here as the,
yeah. So one of the things I asked, so this is just an example of a virtual tour or just a video of your unit, just to show potential applicants what the unit looks like, so you don't necessarily have to take them there before they know for sure they want to see it. In terms of red flags, we'll ask about, how they kept the property in terms of, cleanliness or estate. Those things are not necessarily easy to tell if you haven't visited while they're living there, but a landlord might know that, every time I go there, the place is spotless. So that's something you want to know, that because a person who will care for the property in terms of cleaning and caring for is likely a tenant you want to have, because somebody who doesn't care for the unit, obviously, where that leads, we don't want that. Other things like, I think there's a good question we always ask is, can you give me 5 words to describe this tenant or this person that you know, and you're giving a personal or work reference? If a person's hesitant, they can't think of any words to describe them, sometimes you're like, do you know them? Like, so you want to ask maybe just getting to know you questions, also just making sure that your reference knows the person quite well. So these types of questions. So this, as I'm talking, we're also showing a video of the virtual tour, and it's just, something that you can put together, and it will have, you can house it, maybe if you have a YouTube channel, or if you don't, just keep it handy so that when you have potential tenants, you can share that. Okay, so ways to reduce your vacancy. So once you have a tenant, or you're getting a tenant in place, you want to communicate your vision and values just regularly about your expectations for the unit. You don't want to call them up weekly and tell them, but especially when you're doing your move-in inspections, you can tell them your expectations about care of the lawn, care of the interior and exterior of the unit, some good things that they should know about, making sure they do this. And Andrea mentioned it, cleaning the lint traps, replacing the furnace filter if that's their responsibility. Sometimes in short-term rentals, the short-term tenants don't really do that, but in a longer-term rental, the tenant can do that.
Batteries for smoke and carbon detectors.
And also notifying you of notifying you of any issues like in the unit. You want them to be able to do that immediately. You want to tell them how to do that and when to do that. So and also just making sure that so this is part of what we're talking about, getting the right tenant to make sure that they can take care of the unit properly. Use multiple channels to communicate. So some tenants will be like, I never check my email, but you sent them notices to, in some cases where you have a condo that you're renting, the condo board wants the tenants to do something, you need to make sure. And so using the text, using email, or calling, making sure that they have gotten your message. Visit your property regularly or have someone do that. So in the case of, we have properties, as I said, out in Alberta. We may not be able to visit regularly, but we make sure somebody's regularly there. And so when you have a property that's close by, make sure that you're doing your inspections regularly. Frequently would be quarterly, infrequently would be annually, but you want to make sure you're visiting somewhere in the middle of a year so that you can see how the unit is being treated. Then treat your tenants like customers. So if you've ever been in customer service or you have any roles where you face the public, make sure that your tenants are treated like, they are customers, they're your clients. You want to treat them well. You want to make sure that you listen to what they have to say. Avoid having arguments with tenants, making sure you stay professional as much as possible, because these are not necessarily short-term relationships. You want to make sure that the relationship stays solid throughout your tenancy. And it goes without saying, making sure your tenants feel like they are treated like people. Does increasing quality of unit, increasing rent, decreasing vacancy or selection of tenant, finding the right tenant result in decreasing tenant? Oh, sorry. I think that question got me. I don't fully understand that question.
So does it make sense to increase the unit, like upgrades, to add amenities to it, maybe finishes? I would say that it's definitely area specific what you're going to want to offer. And, if it's the market, other units similar to yours have the upgrades and the features and they're competing with you, absolutely do it, because you're not going to look as good and stand out, and you're going to be trying to still get similar rent, and it's not going to work. So absolutely increasing and updating the property. I mean, we said a simple update could be just a new coat of paint, right, after time. But does it make sense to put quartz countertops or stone countertops if you're downtown Toronto and the other condos have it? Yes. Especially if your unit is older and you're trying to compete with some of the newer units. So, but do you go out and do it just to do it because you like the look? No, if it's not going to garner the rent or fit in with the current market, then you don't do it. If it's in a basement and you're pretty much at the max of what you can get for your basement and it doesn't have stone, then don't go out and put stone countertops, right?
Yeah. Definitely. Very good points, Andrea. So in terms of common mistakes to avoid, so we spoke about pricing. So don't overprice your unit just because you want to make a certain amount. Make sure that your unit is priced well. We spoke about presentation. So it matters how you present your unit. It will take longer to rent if it's presented poorly, even from the pictures online to when people see it in person. If you have a tenant who doesn't care for the property, it's going to be harder to rent when people come see it. So you want to make sure that your tenant is cleaning up so that when you're doing showings, verification and verify and validate. So initial inquiry to 1 day before move-in. So in terms of, when somebody's coming to you and it's 1 day before they move in and they're looking for, and I say 1 day, but sometimes people have a very short time frame to move in from their other unit. You want to understand why people are doing that. Generally, most people don't move overnight, and that is a big red flag. I actually have someone who came to me yesterday and they need to be out of their unit by the end of the month. And the end of this month, so that's Sunday, they have 2 children and a baby on the way. And I think to myself, why are you in this position of moving? And, oh yes, I knew my lease was coming up for it. Did you really? It's not a good situation. Anyways, make sure you're collecting supporting documents. So somebody may show you a document while you're showing the unit and so on. Make sure you're actually collecting those documents and you have them to refer to at a later date. Don't just see the documents and say, okay, I know that he has them or she has them and that's sufficient. You want to get them for your own file. Do multiple cross checks. So social media references, phone numbers. So for example, whenever I do reference checks and people call me back, I look to see if the number is coming from the person with that name. So a lot of the time the reference checks will call back and it's the name of the person on the phone line. It takes a lot for somebody to make up or create a phone number calling from a certain name. And so that's helpful to make sure you're speaking to the right people. Also, when you call companies, they have an answering service, or it's the official company that you're speaking to. They have a website, you know who they are. There's multiple cross checks you can do. You can see social media accounts. You can even check, sometimes people have open Facebook accounts. And you can see a lot about them from just looking at their Facebook and social media to be able to tell whether or not they're a careful person, and whether all the information they've provided you is validated. Another thing you can do is not hiring an experienced team, or not hiring somebody at all and thinking you can do it yourself. If you're an overwhelmed person, you're busy with a good job that you love, and your life is busy, you have children, you have this, you have that, you have commitments. Sometimes it's worth it to just hire an experienced team instead of doing it all yourself, because you may have a longer vacancy because you don't have time to handle inquiries. You don't have time to handle making sure your listing is updated and online and getting noticed.
And doing showings on, because Kemba is more like do showings on demand. Andrew is like, absolutely not. You book me or you don't get to see it. So yeah, but honestly, just you want to make sure that if you can't do it and you're too busy, you don't, you hand it over so that it gets taken care of, because it is a demanding role, right? To do the listing, to do the showings, to do all the search. And Kemba, a lot of the red flags that someone asked before, that's where it comes up to me. The red flags typically come up with things like credit, income verification, and cross-referencing that the information, like the documentation that they provided, matches the numbers and or the contacts that you are trying to reach out to. There are times where it's like, why are you living here in Canada and the person I'm speaking to is in the US? I need to know that you actually work for this company. So, you need to make sure that their head office is the US, or, and sort of not allow people to mislead you into believing that they have this job and this income that they don't, right? So
we mentioned, and so we mentioned doing the move-in, move-out inspections and regular maintenance and inspections. So just make sure you're doing that. Sometimes people don't do that, and they get not so good surprises at the end of a tenancy because they weren't really checking on the property. Making sure you have rental insurance, and you also, your tenant has property, like their content insurance, so that you're protected and they're protected.
It is required. Tenants may think it's not, but it is required that they do have their own content insurance, because that your insurance does not cover their content.
Yeah, some of these we covered in the question, so I'm going to go quickly through this one. Rent is, tenants are responsible to pay rent on time. They're not allowed to withhold rent. You should always provide a receipt. You don't necessarily have to do it monthly, but you can do it annually. Increase is void without notice. So you just have to make sure you're giving your tenant the 90 days notice, and you can only increase your rent once in 12 months.
And in the prescribed years that you're allowed, because 2021 is not allowed.
So in terms of when the rental increases shared in August, by August 31st, there is a notice for the following year. And if you get your notifications to your tenant by October 2nd, you are allowed to increase by January 1st. If you go past that October 2nd, then your rent increase doesn't happen till maybe February 1st, and so on and so forth. So that 90 days matters, and you want to make sure you're planning for that. Put something in your calendar by September 1st, you want to be sending out your rent increase notices for the following year.
So right now, what Kemba is trying to say is if you haven't done your rent increase for 2022, you might want to start to do that now, because we were unable to do the 2021 year, right? So for those of you that do have tenants and you wish to, we encourage you to do it. Why? Because the rate is so low. It's negligible. And if you don't do it, you're foregoing, these small amounts that you can each year. So do your what is it, 1.6 this year?
Yeah, it's not a lot. Any properties that are newly built after November 15, 2018, you are not subject to those rent controls. So brand new condos and so on, you can bump your rent up by any amount you choose, but recognizing that you may lose
You may lose tenants.
we have someone who just left a unit because the landlord increased the rent by 15%, and they moved out because they were like, it's too much too quick, and they'd only been there for 1 year. So and if you have anything that is like adversely affecting you, say you pay the utilities or you pay the property taxes, and they've been bumped up by a significant amount, you are allowed to do that increase yourself, but you just have to apply to the board to do that. There's only a certain number of
And I don't know that you have to apply right away, Kim, but that's only, you apply when the tenant maybe doesn't agree. You can negotiate with your tenant, and if they agree, you can formalize it and do the rent increase. It's it's the tenant that doesn't agree, because I've approached a tenant, said, this is the situation, here are the bills, and they've agreed. And so we've just made the change.
Worked it out. Yeah,
we've worked
but
it
you
out.
just get it in writing, make sure that they agree, and they
Right.
email, so that you don't later on say they increased it and they didn't say anything. You want to make sure you get it in writing. In terms of evictions, you can only evict for non-payment of rent, persistent late payments, undue damage.
Sorry, Kemba, the January 1st date is gone. We're just telling you it's 90 days. So if you're trying to do a rent increase for Jan 1st, you can't, right? We are now into you have to count the 90 days from today or whenever you issue that notice. Are we clear on that? It's 90 days. I'll just put that in here. Someone was just asking.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so impairing safety. So if you have other tenants in the building and there's illegal acts, interference of a reasonable enjoyment or lawful right of the landlord, and then overcrowding. So there's very specific reasons why you may be able to evict someone. I will say to you that non-payment of rent is the most direct way. Everything else is required to prove a lot before you're able to do that. So you just have to make sure that you're documenting everything if there's a need to do this. But what we find is doing the work up front to get good tenants in, you avoid a lot of this, so just making sure that you do that. This was just us sharing a little bit about portfolio, and so we're going to move on from that. We're almost at the end, and so we just want to get to the offers.
So Kemba, what would be a good idea too is to share, just in case we don't get to answer everyone's questions. I'm just going to put the link for our Facebook group in there, because that's where we're going to be able to continue conversations like the great questions that you have about rent increase, or, what are some key, red flags in the rental process, or even if you need to get more details on anything, that's the best place. So I'll just put that in our chat here, and please keep sending your questions. If we don't get to them here tonight, we'll absolutely cover them in the group. And I also put the link there, Kemba. I added it. I don't know if you see it. I put the Facebook information there.
Oh, I don't see it yet, but oh yes, I see it. Oh, I see it on the slide. In the chat.
I just thought I'd play Chucky. I'm playing Chucky tonight with you, so I just thought I'd share that, because I did that probably before the presentation, and I didn't know if you noticed.
No, I didn't see it. So okay, so in terms of offers, we're offering everybody on the call, if you need help finding a tenant and you'd like to use our tenant placement services, we can offer you a 25% discount. We also do this 45 days guarantee, where we find you a tenant within 45 days, or we give you a 50% discount. We ask that you join our Facebook group, and we're going to give a chance to win a 30-minute strategy consultation. So if you have a rental property and you want us to take a look at it and see ways that you could improve it or do better, or even just help you with strategies to find a tenant, and if you're struggling with that.
Or if there's anything we said in this presentation that you need more about, you can always ask us at that strategy session or in the Facebook group, because we know it's not easy to do this all on your own and be successful on your own. It takes a community or a group, and so please reach out.
Yeah. We also offer referrals. So we do offer $100 referral credits if you have someone who's looking for a tenant and we're able to provide them a service. If you referred them to us, we will definitely give you a bonus $100 credit for that, referring that contract. We'll be sending you a tenant guideline brochure to help you with your own tenanting needs if you're looking for a tenant yourself. We also offer a free tenant credit check if you are out there looking for and you're doing it on your own. There are conditions that apply. We do need to get permission to do that. So there are some conditions and we can send that out in the email. The promo I mentioned is Keen 2021. And so, yeah.
Sorry, I see some other questions and I'll see if we can answer a few of them before we go. It's beneficial if we share that with the whole group because you might have thought it and didn't ask. Oh, thanks. Very informative. Thank you, Jamal. So can you secure a tenant before you take possession of a property? Well, as long as the builder and the banks and everyone doesn't know. But yes, in general, until you own the property, you cannot obviously write up a lease, but you can absolutely do the work and due diligence and all of that beforehand. But just, many builders in many cases will allow you to, go in to do videos or pictures to help you do what you need to do, but they absolutely don't want you tenanting the property until you own it.
Yeah, absolutely. And
so
Samara,
mid-December deadline, you got lots of time. You can actually wait till closer to that time before you start listing and getting all the specs that you need. Okay, just so
congratulations, good job.
Yeah, that's right. It's nice to hear that people have bought and their closing dates are coming up, and so awesome.
And also, I just wanted to say hi. I just wanted to let you guys know, anybody who didn't get their questions answered, if you send your question in the group and we weren't able to get over to it, follow us join our Facebook group and send us your questions, and then we can answer them at a later time if they didn't get around to it today. So let us know your questions, okay? Send that in the group, guys.
Yeah, so that's Jada. She's helping us with our some of our social media, specifically the Facebook group. So we're here for you. We want to see you grow and build and own one and another. So let us help you.
Okay, guys, thank you so much for coming. We'll send an email with a recap and some of the resources and offers we mentioned. So have yourselves a great night, and we totally appreciate you joining us and listening in and learning.
Yes, thank you, everyone. Good night.
Thank you, Kemba. Thank you, Andrea. A lot of great information tonight. Made a lot of notes.
And I see some familiar attendees, so that's awesome. Thank you for joining us, everyone. Okay, Kemba, we're finished.
I'm just going to save some of the chats and stuff. Hey, Carrie Ann's there. Yeah. Hi, Carrie Ann.
I did. I saw Carrie Ann join as well. And I saw some new names that I'd spoken to come out as well. So that's good.
Yes, it was so good to be here. Thank you guys for doing this.
Yes, thank you. I see your cutie pie on the screen there, Carrie.
I know. He's one
I haven't seen you guys in a little bit. I usually see you out walking. It's too cold now, isn't it?
It is too cold, so we drive by.
Drive by now.
I know.
Yeah.
Exactly. But thank you guys. You guys were awesome in helping me to find tenants. So thank you so much.
We appreciate that you gave us the time to work for you and get you fantastic tenants. It's still going good, right?
Still going amazing. They're the best tenants ever.
Awesome. We like to hear. Awesome.
You guys have a good night, okay?
You too, Carrie Ann.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Hey, April.
Yeah, I saw April joined us. I haven't heard from you in a while. April, how are you? She's on mute. You're on mute.
Evan, I don't know. Evan, we haven't met you yet, but how are you doing? Are you
there we go.
Listening in?
Oh, hi, April.
Hi. Sorry.
What? Is that a little chipmunk?
That's my little spirit animal. Yep.
Oh, I love it.
He was from my backyard. He comes to visit.
Nice. Oh, nice. I know. I have some regulars too.
I might
I
be
don't
in
know if I
touch.
can
Well,
identify them and give them names, but.
that's Chippy. I will be in touch in the early part of the new year. I'm starting my basement reno. I just had the designer in the drafts to do the plans.
Wow.
So I will be in touch
Awesome.
in the very near future.
Oh, that's
Awesome.
good. I know this was a bit of planning and time, so that's
Yes.
fantastic.
Yeah.
That's excellent. I'd love to see the designs too.
I will. Yeah. So this is just the designs for the permits.
Okay.
And so, yeah, so early stages, but at least moving forward.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. Awesome.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
good. Good to
So,
hear.
yeah, so I definitely will be in touch. I also may have a tenant leaving in the early part of next year, so I'll be in touch.
Okay,
Awesome.
for
Okay,
sure. For
cool.
sure. We'll
Nice
definitely.
to
All
see
right, ladies. Thanks
Yeah.
again. Take
Yeah,
care.
you're welcome.
you
Good
too.
night. April. So
Night,
Evan,
night.
are we gonna get a chance to say hello? I don't know Evan, but hi, Evan.
Oh, maybe Evans. So I'm just gonna try to save the
Alright.
chat.
Yeah, save
maybe-
some of it because remember it would be nice for the people that didn't make it to share some of those questions. Are you frozen, Kemba? Oh, I thought
I
you were.
don't know.
No, I think you're not. Okay. Yeah, save some of it because we've never really, I saved already the names of the attendees. I got that in a screenshot.
Okay, I have them here written as well.
Okay. Did you have about 22 of us in all? It doesn't matter because I think that's what I counted.
I have
about.
16, but I don't have I don't have 3 of us at the very least.
Mhm. Okay, so that's fine. I took screenshots because I'd seen about 22 in all, so we can always look at that. I do have to get on another call in a little bit, so I'm gonna go shortly, but that went well.
Yeah, it did. Everybody was curious, so I think that was good. Okay, I think I've saved it. I don't know where it's saved though, but it says chat has saved. Save chat.
Also, should I screenshot some of it or right? Because I just
Okay, no, I found it. Okay,
you found it? Okay.
Yeah, it's saved. I see it.
Okay.
Awesome. Yeah. Okay, Andrea, have yourself a good night. I'll talk to you soon.
Okay. Okay. Good night, Kemba.
Bye.
Okay. Bye.